One of the more challenging things about using Docker Compose is how do we manage things like secrets? And by secrets, I mean things like usernames, passwords, email addresses, API keys, basically anything that I know that I don't want you to know. How do we keep those things secret? What I'm going to show you today is how I use Ansible Vault and Ansible by extension to manage those secrets with my Docker Compose file. So if all you're doing is managing one Docker Compose file, this might seem like overkill, but very quickly, certainly in my self-hosting journey, I found myself managing not only my main server at home. I had a Raspberry Pi that was running some containers, and then a VPS, and then something at my parents' house, and so it goes. And these days I manage anywhere from 20 to 30 different servers, and it can get a little bit challenging not only to keep on top of all of the maintenance of those servers, but also challenging to remember what I did 6 months ago. And so for me, it's vitally important to put that stuff into config management, into Git. Now, I've lived my life kind of open on the internet for the last decade or so, certainly talking about source code. And one of the key ways I've done that is by using encryption for things I care about in my GitHub repos. And so by using Ansible Vault, I'm able to encrypt those secrets using AES 256-bit encryption and prevent anybody except maybe the NSA from looking at my data. This is still valid even if you're using a self-hosted Git instance or a GitLab or something in a company or something local where you have information that you on your team or personally want to keep from other people. And this is particularly useful for API keys and stuff in team, work team environments. And so you can go back through Git history, not only to see what changed and why it changed, but who changed it. When it's just me, obviously it's me that changed it. But in a team environment, it's highly likely that it wasn't you that made that change. And maybe you need to know who to blame and pay for the beers that evening, who made a change they perhaps shouldn't have done. Now, all of this stuff does come with a cost. You can't go and SSH into a server anymore and go and change a file at random. You have to commit, pun intended, you have to commit to the system. And that is to use source control and to use Ansible Vault to manage your, in this case, Docker Compose files moving forward. This applies to not only Compose files, but any configuration on a Linux system or Ansible target system that you want to manage using this system. So the trouble is, if you make a change outside of this system, you've lost all hope of trying to, that change will get overwritten the next time you use the system. But also you've lost all hope of trying to figure out what happened when something goes wrong, or even in 6 months' time, like I said, if you can't remember who did what, where, when, why. And so what we need is a way to encrypt those secrets, and Ansible Vault gives us that. So let's take a look. Now I'm over here at my workstation. Don't worry. These API keys are time limited. They expire at midnight tonight. So by the time you see this video, they'll be completely worthless, or at least I hope anyway. Let's encrypt this file. Okay, it's really easy with Ansible Vault. So Ansible Vault ships with Ansible, certainly as part of the brew package on macOS it does. So I can use Ansible Vault to do a few things. I can encrypt, decrypt, view, and edit encrypted files. So let's use it to encrypt this file. Ansible Vault encrypt, and we'll encrypt vault.yaml. It's going to ask me for a password. So in this case, I'm just going to type password. And there we are. We can see that file is now encrypted. Now let's say I wanted to view the contents of that file. I could do Ansible Vault view file name. So I type my password in again. And look, it prints it out on the terminal. Perhaps not the most secure thing to print your secrets out in the terminal like this, because bash history is a thing. So another thing we can do is Ansible Vault edit, and this lets us actually edit the file in an editor. So in this case, it's Vim. So I could go in and change, I could change my password to, I don't know, the Avengers, something like that. Quit out of Vim, and you see in real time, everything updates. And then the final thing we're going to do here is do Ansible Vault decrypt Vault, and I think you're probably getting the idea by now, but you can see we can manage an encrypted file this way. Now, what's really nice is we can start to use these values elsewhere in our Ansible code. And so if we take a look at my group vars folder here, this secretsvid.yaml file contains some values that I'd rather were not public. In this case, it's my Cloudflare Zone API and DNS tokens. This allows traffic, which is a reverse proxy that I'm using in the container world, to automatically generate Let's Encrypt certificates. And it does that using DNS validation against Cloudflare to prove that I own this domain. Now, what we need to do next is run some Ansible against the host. Some basics we need to take care of first. Now, I use something called a just file. This is completely optional, but I find it very difficult to remember all of the syntax all the time, or sometimes I actually just can't be bothered to type out Ansible, Vault, encrypt, Vault.yaml, like all of this stuff. And so I like to wrap this stuff in a just file. So what I can do here is, do just Vault encrypt. And what that's going to do is it just encrypted our Ansible Vault file that we decrypted a minute ago. But it did that using this Vault password file here, which I set in my Ansible config file just here. So all this stuff kind of links together, and I'm aware there's a lot to take in right away, but the end result's pretty straightforward. So we have a Vault file with some encrypted values in it. We have group vars that use some of those encrypted values. And then we just have a very simple Nginx web server that's going to sit behind traffic using these things to get a Let's Encrypt certificate. Next thing we can do is, if we look in the just file once more, we need to make sure that we've got our prerequisites installed. I'm using some Ansible Galaxy roles here. So if I do just rex, we can see that actually I already did that before I pressed record. And so it's actually probably time to try and configure this thing. So what I've done is I've spun up an LXC container over here on a Proxmox host. This is running on the IP 0.66. So let's go and just check my hosts file over here. 0.66 user root. It's a very basic container. Logging in via SSH as root is probably not advisable in the long term, but certainly for the purposes of this demo, it's going to make our lives easier. So running the code against this host isn't too difficult. All we need to do is run our playbook/configure.yaml. Let's go take a quick look at that. This is running a few basic roles. So this one, grog.package, this installs a list of packages from, let me put this over here actually. So grog.package on line 6. This installs a list of packages, things like bash completion, DNS utils, git, htop, some basic stuff, right? The next thing I have is gearlingguy.docker. Now this installs Docker in the LXC. I mean, you could do it on a VM or whatever you want. For the purposes of our demo, I'm doing Docker inside an LXC. This next one, bash aliases, this installs some bash aliases that I use to manage containers on a system, as well as some ZFS stuff too. And then the final one is this Docker Compose generator. Now this is a role up on Ansible Galaxy. And what this does is it essentially takes a Ginger 2 template, which we have on the left here. It takes this Ginger 2 template and runs through all of this logic, saying if a container network mode is defined, then put network mode in. And essentially you input a nested dictionary of values and it outputs a formatted Docker Compose file for you. And the beauty of this is this can take as inputs encrypted values. Well, technically the values as far as Ansible is concerned are decrypted at runtime using Ansible Vault. But as far as we're concerned, they're encrypted. So let's actually run this thing. So if we look at the just file again, we can see the command we need to run is just configure, and what do we call it? Secretsvid. Just configure secretsvid. Now this is going to connect via SSH into our LXC container and do a few things, as we talked about. It's going to run through the playbook in order. So first of all, it's going to go ahead and install those packages for us. Then it will go and install Docker, then my bash aliases, and then it'll generate the Docker Compose file. Now let's fast forward through this. All right, and we're done. So let's go and take a quick look at that host now. So we'll do root 10.42.066, and we're in. Now, in the home directory, which is the path that by default the Docker Compose generator uses, you can override that with an Ansible default override. We actually create a Docker Compose file. In this Docker Compose file, we can see several things. We can see that all the volumes have been created. And if we look in the original variables that we specified over here, we can see things like the app data path, for example, wasn't actually specified as /opt/app data. And so what this would let you do is it would let you do variable substitution for multiple things at once, not just secrets. But secrets have worked too. So if we look under the environment section, we can see here we've got our zone API token as well as our DNS API token. And these are both things we configure over on Cloudflare. And this is done under the API tokens section here. So we've got these two tokens here with the permissions zone.dns, and then this one is read all on zone for all zones. There is some documentation over on the Let's Encrypt Lego site, but that's kind of beyond the scope of today's video. So let's bring up this container using Docker Compose. We do Docker Compose pull first of all. So we'll pull these images down from Docker Hub, assuming that they haven't been deleted within the 30-day time limit that Docker announced this week. Not good news, if you ask me. Docker scoring another own goal there, but it's not the first time, and I doubt it will be the last. Now, if we take a moment and run Docker Compose up, I'll do a -d and then I'll attach to the logs so we can see what's going on. So we can see in here, there's a bunch of stuff going through. So we've got our DNS challenges going through for this test web domain. It takes a couple of minutes for the propagation to happen sometimes. And it looks like the validations have succeeded already. So let's go to this website. I created a DNS entry in my local DNS server for this earlier. And if we look straight away, we have an Nginx request come through, referrer, HTTPS. So that's all good. That's all working. And we have our Let's Encrypt certificate. And the only way that that would have happened was those API keys being passed through from Secrets Vault, the secret vault that we created with Ansible Vault, through the Docker Compose generator, and then being deployed onto our target system at the other side. And so there you have it. That is really as simple as it gets for using this thing. Now we can do a little bit more. So this just file, and this is an Ansible feature, not a just file feature, but you can actually specify tags on your playbooks. So if we look at the playbooks configure playbook that's in here, you can see I've got a tag for compose. Now, running the full Ansible doesn't take that long on this host, maybe a couple of minutes at most. You know, it's got to go through and check all the packages and then check the Docker's installed and etc., etc. But by the time you're managing a fully configured and deployed server, it can take 5 minutes. And sometimes if I'm making a one-line change to my Docker Compose file, I don't want to wait that long. So let's do that. Let's make a one-line change to our Docker Compose file. Let's change nginx.test to banana.test, right? So we can go to just configure secrets vid and then do --tags compose. And now watch how fast this is in real time. Done. And so that goes through all of the same logic and updates everything underneath that we need to see before. And using Docker Compose up, it will recreate Nginx based on what we just did. And then I think if we look in the logs, it'll go through and yes, there you go. It's doing another DNS propagation to generate another certificate using the Cloudflare DNS API token that we passed through before. And so there we have it, banana.test at badgersbits.io. I don't have a DNS entry for that one. Didn't think that far ahead, but hopefully you get the idea. Using these techniques, we're able to have secrets that are encrypted and publishable to public GitHub. I mean, if we go to github.com and look at my infrastructure repo, you'll see that my variables are there, public for all to see. I mean, you can see that my personal Vault file is quite a bit larger than the test one. And there'll be a link to the Git repo I used throughout this video in the description down below. You can see that I put all of my stuff out there using AES 256-bit encryption with Ansible Vault. So go ahead, give it a try. Let me know how you find it down in the comments down below. Now, if you like this kind of thing, you can go and find more of me over at selfhosted.show. That's a podcast I do with Chris Fisher from Jupiter Broadcasting. We talk about all things self-hosted over there, so go check it out. Thanks for watching.